you think you're the main character in your own life because it's your life. Like, that makes sense. But I mean, look to, obviously Jesus, look to all of like legacies and heroes of the faith and just people in general who were such incredible servants. Like, they are the ones who we know, and they're the ones that we recognize as, true heroes, but their lives weren't about them at all.
Welcome back to Gen Z Unplugged. In today's episode, we're going to be talking about the lies that young people are told in today's culture and how you can combat what the culture is telling you and how you can live differently and do something extraordinary.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of almost misinformation about what young people should be doing out there. And I know that our listeners get that a lot. A lot of my peers get that. I got that. And it's great to be in these conservative circles where we're really enforcing good values and good standards and all these things. But there's so many young people out there who aren't in those circles. And so we thought that this would be a really good episode to help you all not only identify what the lies are, but to live differently. So we'll go ahead and jump right in. Rachel, you want to introduce our first lie?
Yes, our first one is you have to know what you want to do right out of college. Or even before college. If you're applying to colleges, you should know exactly what you want to do at age 18 or 19 or 17, all these things, like right as you apply or right as you get out of college. So
right. I mean, most people haven't even had like a relationship at that point. They haven't even made major decisions. They've never like bought a beer. Like all of these things that, are part of adulthood that, you haven't gotten to do that yet, but you're expected to know. I mean, I remember feeling pressure at 14 or 15 to know what I wanted to do because you had to decide on what college to go to so you can major in the thing you want to do. But I think one benefit, I mean, everybody knows I have a lot of problems with American colleges, but one benefit of our, college education system is that it is super broad. And I think in other countries, you do have to decide and specialize right away, and it's harder to reroute. But in the US, like, a big part of the American dream is being able to jump from career to career without like major repercussions. And I don't want to generalize, but I know that in my experience, like, I went into college from high school expecting to do one thing. I changed my major one time. I added minors, I dropped minors. So there was so much changing that happened that what I ended up doing after school was totally different than what I had originally declared when I applied to colleges.
Yeah, I also think being hired out of college too, I think employers are starting to realize that more and more, that someone can be adequate or a good employee for the company even if they didn't major in what the company specializes in.
Yeah.
So for example, like all the liberal arts colleges, a lot of professors and a lot of employers are realizing that philosophy majors are actually really well-rounded individuals and that they can contribute to a business in the same way someone who majored in finance would. So I think a recognizing of that is something that's kind of turning, and it's benefiting young people nowadays too. So it's good to know that in choosing your major.
Yeah, it is good. And like choosing something like philosophy, very versatile and not pigeonholing yourself too much in what you might end up doing. And something that I figured out in school and kind of early adulthood while, developing my career a little bit more is that sometimes the desire you have to do a certain job is actually the key piece. Like in my experience, I in college wanted to be a counselor because I wanted to help people. But the way that me helping people was realized didn't end up being in counseling. It ended up being at the Luz Center, where we help young women by mentoring them and empowering them and inspiring them. So it's like you have to understand what it is that drives you, what your passion is, and then you can live that out in different ways. And I think our speakers talk about this really well. So Margie Ross, who's on our board of governors, she talks about how you don't have to go into a job, especially your first job, loving it. You just have to find a piece of it that you love to do. And so maybe if you, wanted to go into finance, but you end up going into real estate, you love the numbers and you love the negotiations, like you're able to meet the desire and the passion that you had in a small way and then learn more throughout the job. And like that is the most like sage advice that I've ever gotten, is just try to learn as much as you can at your first job so that you can figure out what it is you actually want to do.
Yeah, I love what you said about like recognizing the desire you have too of why you want to do the job. Because I was similar to you. I was 2 weeks before college, I was set to like go into nursing, and I was like, and which
I
is
didn't know that.
yeah, I was gonna be a nurse
What?
all the way up until 2 weeks before college, which is crazy because it was during all the COVID stuff. I was like, I'm
Mm-hmm.
really gonna like help people and do all that. So very similar desire to you. Um, and then 2 weeks before, I was like, wait a second, I'm not sure if I actually want to do this. I kind of got cold feet. And when thinking about the actual job that nurses do, I just realized it wouldn't be a good fit for me long term. But
Mm-hmm.
what I loved about it was the job security of it. I was like, I always have a job. People always need nurses. But then I realized that was more of like a fear-based thing, fear-based that I was going off of. So then I pivoted and did communications, which is very broad. My mom
Mm-hmm.
always said you're always going to need to know how to write and how to talk to people. So go into that, and then you can see what you want to do after college with that. And then I ended up here where, like you said, we
Mm-hmm.
mentor young women, we help them, inspire them. So that desire came true, but through a different route. And like you also said, a lot of our speakers cover this too, especially with your first job. Um, we were just talking about, I posted a reel from Mary Margaret at our DC summit, and she said, for your first job, you don't need to have everything figured out, and you kind of can't and shouldn't unless you're a superstar. Like
Yeah.
that's not normal. And her advice is also very, very sage advice. She just earned a permanent seat for the Daily Wire in the White House briefing room. So she's obviously very successful,
Mm-hmm.
and that advice coming from her, I think is really important for young people to hear.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it is interesting to me how much like it can change throughout your life, that you're not married to your first job, you're not married to your major. I mean, I think about Kimberly Begg, our president. She's worked in like she was general counsel of Young America's Foundation, and then she worked in Catholic education. She was head of school for a time, and now she's the president of a nonprofit. So it's like, um, so I think that just proves that you can jump around a little bit and you're not tied to any one thing. So I don't know. I just really encourage young people not to get pigeonholed in something and not to listen to all of the people who are trying to tell you that this is what you're going to do forever. And I wish colleges would be more clear about that. I mean, the colleges are more incentivized to say we had this many majors or this many people placed into a job. So they're less incentivized to tell you that it's okay if you don't end up using their major, because that's one of their fears, is like for a college's students to say, oh, well, I never used the major I majored in. But that's okay. You still got the college experience and got the experience of all the extracurriculars and the classes and how to learn and how to work. So I just think that piece is super valuable, and people not to get too stuck in their major. And the second line I think is related. The line number 2 is you should avoid commitment in your 20s. And that is such a prevalent message. And I think it applies to a lot of things. It applies to working, like we were just talking about. It applies to obviously marriage, or even where you're going to live or what church you're going to go to or what friends you're going to spend time with. So people are so caught up in obsessing and being paralyzed by, oh my gosh, is this going to be the right thing? Sometimes you just have to make the choice. And a lot of times it's not like this is right and this is wrong. It's like God gives us the option and he's going to bless the path that is most glorifying to him. So I think about my in-laws, my husband's parents, who moved around every 2 years, sometimes less, in the military. And something that they said about their experience really stuck with me. And I had asked them, so you're moving around every 2 years. Did you even bother trying to make friends if you knew you're going to leave? And she said, 100%. You have to dive in. You have to, choose a church, stick with it, invest in friendships, have people over, even if you know that you're going to leave. And I think that is really good advice, because otherwise you end up with potentially decades of not knowing what to do and not having a community. So it is much better to dive in. And that's still really valuable. And they have friends from, Japan or Hawaii or France who they still are in connection with because they chose to commit in those early years, in those short periods of time.
Yeah, that is so valuable. And like you said too, it's very biblical to just kind of dive in, and if God will bless your path, or you'll pivot.
Yeah.
And he'll make it very, very known to you. I know in my life, he's made it very known when I need to pivot. So as long as your heart is open to that, open to pivoting, and you're not married to any sort of idea, but are committed to something, you kind of just have to dive in and then go from there. Because even like we were just talking about in colleges, you do have to choose a major at some point. And whether you use it or not, or whether you switch your major or add minors, drop minors, that can change, but you do have to graduate if you choose to go the college route.
Yeah. You just have to do something.
Yes.
There's a really good book. I don't know who the author is, but it's actually called Just Do Something. And it's from a Christian perspective for grads. So I think that book is it's super small. That book is really helpful for people. So I think that's great. And then another concept we were thinking of is the lack of commitment in a first job.
Yeah.
And I think you talked about this really well. So let me give you a chance to share on that.
Yeah. In your first job, there's this idea that in young people that you don't have to work hard early. And that's a thing that I think a lot of people fall into. And again, Mary Margaret talks about this very well. She, at the DC Summit, she was like, don't be afraid to hustle, and don't be afraid to hustle early. And another book that we were talking about, I think last month or something, is The Defining Decade. I don't know who the author of that one is.
Meg J.
Yeah. I read that, I think 2 years ago, and it's all about jumping in, hustling early on, that will pay off later. And employers recognize if your heart is in it or not.
Yeah.
And like you said, you don't have to love everything about your first job.
Mm-hmm.
You just have to love something. Mary Margaret says, make a little bit of money.
Yeah.
And then, decide and see if that's your passion, if you want to stick with it or not. But while you're there, put your heart in it. Work really hard. Show your value as a person. And yeah, your work ethic, and that pays off.
100%. It really does. And again, it's probably not going to be your dream job. And I think that causes people to have a lack of motivation. Because I think about a lot of my peers who, they started out with their first job and they were so bogged down by the fact that it wasn't what they actually wanted to do, that they didn't want to do a good job. But it doesn't matter if you're cleaning toilets. Like, you are called to serve with a full heart. It doesn't matter what you're doing. And just trust that God is going to build you up in that.
And there's even glory in there's almost more glory in doing what you don't want to do. Like, you can, offer that up, put Jesus on the cross and be like, I don't want to do this.
Yeah.
But because it's a sacrifice, and it's because it's not something you want to do long term, there's almost more benefits that can come out of that if you stick to it and work hard.
Right.
Yeah, I think that's a good point to bring up too. There's a lot of good that can come out of that.
Yeah.
And being unsatisfied where you are right now, in hope and in working towards something more long term that you would want to do.
Yeah. The art of hustling. I think that Gen Z, we gotta admit, we're not very good at that. I think our parents' generation, the Gen Xers, are very much hustlers. So I think people looked at their parents and was like, "Ooh, I don't want to do that. So I'm gonna be very protective of my time, and don't touch my PTO, and all have these really high standards." Which, again, there's some employee rights and all of that is really important. But Mary Margaret said this so well, when you are a young woman and you don't yet have a family, you don't have kids to worry about, this is the most time and flexibility that you're ever going to have in your life. And when the family comes along, everything is going to change. So it really is a really special time to do that.
And I think young people get scared too, because they look at their parents, and my dad has been in the same job for, I think, 22 years.
Whoa.
Which is a lot of the same thing.
That's the age of one college senior.
Yes. And I think they look at that and are scared. My dad actually likes what he does, but he also has the higher purpose of providing for the family and things like that. So even if he doesn't like it, he has that higher purpose. Right. But just because our parents have had the same job for 20-something years doesn't necessarily mean we need to. There's a lot of other routes that we were talking about earlier. Technology can provide that. And having flexibility, especially as a young woman, is definitely a good thing. So don't be scared.
Yeah. And I think that actually ties really well into our third lie, which is you need to be constantly busy and constantly burn out in order to be successful, and equating total exhaustion with success. And I think that that is a really disordered view of what it means to be successful. And it really, again, going back to scripture and God's plan for us, like there is a reason that he made the Sabbath and created a day where people were instructed to simply rest. Like God values rest. But also, like we were talking about, like it's important to hustle because the rest actually becomes earned. Like you earn the rest by hustling. And I think I was listening to at Word on Fire and an interview with is it Bishop Barron? Yeah, Bishop Barron. Okay. And he was talking about how like he lived in Santa Barbara and he had this beautiful backyard that looks up to the mountains, and like yes, it's nice to go sit out there on a Saturday morning and have coffee, but how much better does it feel after you've done a 10-mile hike to go and sit and rest and look at the beauty? And that's something that I think about like on a weekend or a day off or whatever, is like, wow, I can actually enjoy this day of rest because I've done the work that was necessary to, earn it in a sense.
It's kind of that like leisure versus being lazy.
Yeah.
And having productive leisure versus unproductive laziness. And it depends on what you do with your time too. When you're relaxing, do you scroll or do you watch a sunset?
Right.
There are very different kind of values there. And value in how you spend that time. But a lot of my friends, especially, not to hate on the hill, but a lot of my friends who work on the hill are constantly stressed and constantly burned down,
Yeah.
or burnt out. And I mean, the Bible says that Jesus come so that we have life and have it to the full. I think about that all the time.
Same. Super abundance, right?
Yes, and overabundance. Like, and if we're not living that way, then we are wasting the gift of life. So just keeping that in mind too.
Yeah, no, I think that's really good. And I don't know, I wonder, I would love to kind of see a history on how we started to glamorize being burnt out, because you look at other countries and, like we are proud of the fact that we are rugged individualists, like, talking about Mom Donnie's speech where he called us out for that. So yeah, like that is a good quality, to be individualist in working hard, but then also recognizing the benefits of community, the benefits of having to depend on other people. I do think a lot of the like hyper stress and hyper burnout phenomenon that happens with people is because we refuse to depend on anyone else. And something that I've been talking about like with my communities is like, first of all, being someone who offers to help, and then also being someone who accepts help. And instead of, I'm reading this really great book. It's called Radically Whole by David Gibson. And he talks about these little words that we think are magic. That's, let me know what I can do to help. Okay. Like, is that actually helpful? Instead of saying, I'm going to bring you dinner tonight, or I'm going to help you. What's the most helpful thing I can do? Versus just offering to like, throwing it out there in a lazy way, knowing that no one's going to take you up on your offer. And then also on the receiving end, saying, oh, I'm going to accept this, and there's nothing wrong with me for needing help. So I always love it when my friends are like, yeah, I'm struggling. Just help me do whatever this thing is. So I think if we had more of that, there would be less burnout for sure.
Yeah, I've never thought of that way of rephrasing it. Like, I'm going to do this, or like, I'm going to help you no matter what. Just tell me what. I think that's actually super helpful. I've never thought about that way before. But yeah, I think especially like what you said with the studying, kind of how this all came to be. I think social media has played a big part in that, because these influencers and even friends just disguise chronic busyness with like excitement.
Yeah. Yes. Oh my gosh, that's so true. Yeah, like filling your schedule up so much. And it's not like, I'm talking about work things and outside of work things where, someone's working a really, really hard week and then they sign up to go on a trip to New York City, and then the next week they're flying to whatever place. Like it's like the extracurriculars too.
Yeah, and it's even worse when you have that with no direction at all. Like if you're chronically busy, or chronically, just burnt out. And another thing that social media definitely amplifies is FOMO.
Mm-hmm.
I, for one, definitely struggle with this. Not even necessarily in social media, because I'm not on personal social media a lot. I do it for the company,
Yeah.
like our organization, but personally I'm not on it. But it's even like if my friends say they had a really fun weekend and I didn't do anything, I'm like, oh man, like I missed out.
Yeah.
Um, and then it's just not live with gratitude.
Mm-hmm.
Because maybe they wish they had a more leisurely weekend. You never really know.
Right.
But the FOMO definitely gets young people down, I
Yeah.
think.
Yeah, I remember in college, why do people always want to do something that starts at like 10:30 p.m.? That is a terrible phenomenon that happens in our world. But I would have FOMO and I would say yes, and then I would go and I would never be happy I went. And I was like, why? What? Okay, well, obviously there's a couple times, but when it's something that like starts that late and interferes with your schoolwork or, your job, it's usually not going to be worth it. At least it wasn't for me most of the time. I mean, I have amazing friends, but most of us went to bed at like 9:30. So, yeah, I don't know. There's like sometimes, yes, you need to say yes to those things, but sometimes it's like we don't have to be obsessed with doing every single thing. And my husband put this really well. We were kind of talking about the people who, are chronically busy. And I'm like, I'm definitely guilty of this too, but who sign up for everything and always want to go out of town and they're coming back and they're like totally exhausted, but they seem like they're having fun. He's like, you have to have nostalgia for right now. I think a lot of the motivator for people signing up to have those crazy schedules is so that they can tell stories about it down the line and feel nostalgia for this time. It's like, I thought that was really interesting. It's like you're investing in your stories that you're going to tell, which is great. Honestly, like I love hearing my parents' stories from high school and all of that, but at some point there's a limit for like how much do you invest in the nostalgia you'll feel in 15 years. Whereas you can have nostalgia for like a Sunday afternoon where you and your friends had a picnic and did something whatever. So I don't know, just some thoughts.
Yeah, that is definitely a good point. And the next lie that we're going to be discussing is you need to be the main character or the victim in order to succeed or in order to be noticed.
This is a good one. This is totally part of the general movement and message given to young people of like the main character energy. I mean, the memes are all over Instagram about like main character moment. And I think we're all so obsessed with ourselves and like selflessness has been elevated to a virtue at this point that people intentionally are obsessed with themselves. And it's a terrible quality, but we're promoting it all over the place, which is wild to me. So yeah, I mean, fighting the fact that we're not supposed to be the main characters. And Isabel Brown at our College Women's Summit, she had like the most amazing line. She said, "It is a radically countercultural idea to realize that we are not the main characters in our lives," which, I mean, I'm totally in conservative circles and hear things like that all the time, but that really resonated with me because of course you think you're the main character in your own life because it's your life. Like that makes sense. But I mean, look to, obviously Jesus, look to all of like legacies and heroes of the faith and just people in general who were such incredible servants. Like they are the ones who we know and they're the ones that we recognize as true heroes, but their lives weren't about them at all. Like the reason that they are, venerated by us is because they weren't about themselves.
Yeah. And there's this idea that you have to be super loud and super performative almost to have that. When like you said, all the heroes and all the people that we know were not like that.
Mm-hmm.
Almost all of them were not like that. We talk a lot in the office about servant leadership. And almost all of them were servant leaders, the people that we know, the people that are in history books, biblical patriarchs. Yeah, they weren't loud and performative. And the problem is that the culture does reward that. So it does work, which is the problem. It works in short term, obviously, and gives you dopamine and gives you like, oh, I'm somebody, I'm special. And because the culture does reward that, it feels long term, even though it's not. Which is part of it.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. And I think that's kind of the main character side, but the victim mentality that you brought up, um, that is also a really big problem. And that's just another avenue towards being a main character is who was that Olympian who was talking about herself and how great she is? You remember that clip?
This is Simone.
No, it wasn't Simone. It was this year. I think she was a speed skater, but she was just talking about like, oh, of course I won. Of course I got gold.
Yes, I know who you're talking about, but I don't know her name.
We'll put it in the description.
Yeah.
But yeah, she was just so about herself, and everybody on the internet was like, "Oh, this is very off-putting." And you look at someone like, Alyssa Liu, who was all about celebrating her teammates. It was just such an interesting contrast. Anyway, so I think she's a really good example of the mentality of being the main character, but then you also have people who are so addicted to being the victim. I don't know if you've listened to these clips of Gavin Newsom lately, but he's just come out so much of like people bully me because I'm this, this, and this, and I that like speaks to people because of the victim hierarchy that's out there. If you haven't watched Matt Walsh's Victim Hierarchy, it's hilarious and has a lot of truth to it, so please watch that. But like certain people are placed at the top, and whatever you can do to earn victim points, you should do that. And I think like it is very pervasive and it feels good because it feels like you have the control. Like even think about relationships. When you are the person in the relationship who has been hurt, you often have like more power. And obviously there's abusive relationships and I don't want to speak to those, but um when you're the one who's mad at someone else and that person is groveling, you feel like good about yourself, which is really messed up. So I think that it kind of happens like on the big level of like, oh, I'm a cultural victim. And then also like, oh, I'm a victim in this relationship. So it's really insidious in all these different ways.
Yeah, and the culture also rewards you if you have like a victim story. So people play up their stories more than they are. So that way they have those points. Because you're more likely to get hired at some places if you're like, "Oh, I was, this, and this, and all these things." So it's not good for the brain to
Yeah.
even do that because then it overemphasizes some things and it can mess up your value system if you put too much emphasis on that, which might not even be true. So you overplay and then you overemphasize it to the point where it's a lie.
Yeah. Yeah.
Which is a huge problem.
Yeah, that's crazy. And I think it's important, like how you talked about how it changes your mindset, because there are tons of studies that have concluded that expressing gratitude actually produces higher levels of happiness and contentment in your life. So if that has such a good impact, imagine what the negative impact of a victim mentality would have in your life, where you're constantly dwelling on, oh, I'm oppressed, or oh, people don't like me. That is going to lead to a worse state of mental health. So I love how the antidote to the victim mentality is a grateful mind and a grateful heart.
Yeah. And I think if you have that victim mentality, it also attracts the wrong people to you.
Mm-hmm.
Like you get surrounded by victims and then you're all like, "Oh, I'm the better victim." Like it's
Mm-hmm.
just not going to you're not going to surround yourself with people who are uplifting you long term.
Right.
They might play into your victimhood and be like, "Oh, I'm so sorry." But eventually people are going to get tired of that. So you're it just doesn't serve you well
Mm-hmm.
long term. And then one more point I want to speak to for going back to the main character thing. It's also rewarded if you're like super out there with your opinions, with your fashion sometimes. Like the more out there you are,
Mm-hmm.
the more you'll succeed or the more you'll be liked or the more cool you seem because you're going against mainstream. There's nothing wrong with being attracted to traditional values, whether that be patriotism or family or, all these things that used to be cool and now are not cool because of mainstream culture. But now it's just, yeah, the more out there you are, the more controversial you are, um, is better.
Yeah.
That's what they say.
Yeah. It's all the online rage baiting. And the internet and social media is to blame for so much of this. I'm actually listening to The Anxious Generation by Jonathan Haidt right now, and it talks all about the effects of social media. And one thing that he points out is how like social media allowed the average person who haven't necessarily done anything amazing to become famous. And they are elevated to the level of, idol role model for what? Like they don't actually, and I don't want to, they're still valuable as a person, but like they haven't actually done anything that's worth looking up to, like, someone inventing something or designing something or doing something good for humanity. So we've like elevated this class of role models for young people that are thriving off of what? Like no particular skills or no particular value that they're adding outside of just being made in the image and likeness of God.
Yes.
Okay, next lie we have up is follow your feelings. This one, very common. As Ben Shapiro says, facts don't care about your feelings, which is true. But I think they're valuable and they give some insight into things, and your gut knows a lot and you have to trust your gut. But when your feelings don't line up with reality, then they can't be trusted.
Yeah, people tell you if something is hard or if something feels not good, then it's not worthwhile, which is not true. A lot of hard things are very worthwhile and are very good. And just because it doesn't give you instant gratification doesn't mean that you don't do it.
Right. Yeah, hard doesn't equal wrong. Yeah, that is very wise. And I think what is really confusing to people, and I think especially in relationships, because I hear this so much, and this is often what I experience, is, well, are these feelings that aren't rooted in anything real, or is this my gut instinct? And that is a very challenging distinction for a lot of people, but that's when you have to share your feelings with people in your community who you trust and can like affirm them or tell you, no, you're like a little bit detached from reality.
Yeah, no, that's definitely a good point. I've had a lot of friends that do that, and I'm happy to be like, oh, this is a little insane that you're thinking like this. And the same thing with me. I go to them and they tell me the same thing. But it's good to have those people in your life that you can go to for things like that, and that will actually tell you the truth.
Right.
Yeah, because that is a hard thing, being able to distinguish, gut versus just something that's hard that you're going through that you might just need to push through.
Yeah, that's where it's so important to just have people around you. And that's something that I struggled with so much. I like was paralyzed by decision making because I couldn't identify the difference between, well, I just don't want to do this versus, okay, I should not do this.
It's analysis paralysis.
Analysis paralysis. I always said I lived in the prison of indecision. It was so bad. So yeah, and like now I feel like I've gotten to the point where I can lean on people who will tell me, what's real. And it is interesting how throughout your life, like your gut becomes more refined.
Yes.
Like you become better at identifying the garbage.
As your frontal lobe fuses, your gut gets more fused as well.
Well, the gut is the second brain, they say.
Yeah.
So that's a really good point. And how like before you're 25, it kind of makes sense that you would be so paralyzed by decisions because your brain isn't totally there yet. So it's really important for you as college students to seek out wise counsel from people who you know and trust and like, so that they can help you identify when your feelings are totally disconnected from fact.
I like how you said too earlier in the beginning when you first brought it up that feelings can inform a lot of your decisions, which kind of goes back to what we were talking about when you're picking your major, and kind of that desire that's in your heart can inform a lot of other things. So that desire and like the feelings do matter, and you should take them into account. You're not called to be this hardened person with no personality, no feelings. Like no one likes that. Jesus doesn't want you to do that. Feelings and your heart is a gift, and it's good to listen to those to a point, like you said. But yeah, it does inform a lot of things. And then going back to the college thing, if you have a desire or something on your heart and going to your parents and be like, Mom, do you think I would be a good nurse? Or things like that, is a good thing to ask people too.
And the last lie we're going to talk about is related to this, but it's the lie that you can live a life that's not rooted in anything, and that you can live a life according to changing standards and changing values, which I think is a very common progressive belief, is that, the world changes every day and you have to adjust to the standards. I mean, even like trying to keep up with wokeness and political correctness and all the words that you're supposed to say, like, I never know what to say for, when I'm talking about something, I never know what words to say because there's this ever changing standard of what's acceptable and what's woke enough or what's politically correct enough. So it is this lie that your values can change throughout your life and that's no big deal, and that it's impossible to have anything rooted in reality because life is evolved so much.
And of course, a little bit of evolving is natural, and that's good, especially as your frontal lobe fuses.
Yes.
Your opinions can change and things like that. But overall, your foundation as a person in your faith, and in your values should stay around the same. And if it changes a whole bunch, that's when the people in your life are like, what is going on?
Right.
And they should call you higher, and call you to, be more consistent.
Yeah. I think that we have lost an understanding of timeless values because progressivism has defined our culture so much by this changing standard of what's appropriate and acceptable. But I think about Becky Norton Dunlop, who spoke here in December about the core principles of conservatism that were laid out in the Sharon Statement in the 80s. And these principles are genuinely timeless. It's things like every human is made in the image of God and deserves to be protected. And we have, like the Constitution says, certain unalienable rights. And those things aren't going to change based on an administration or based on where we stand in the world or our neighborhood or our school. That those are things that actually go back to the beginning of time and can be defended throughout human history. That it's not like we have to keep an open mind about these things. Like, open-mindedness is fantastic. Like, I think it's wise to be humble in what you believe and not stick too hard to any one opinion, but there's certain things that you cannot bow on. And I think those 7 principles are a really great guideline. And then also like biblical standards. Like the 10 commandments aren't changing, like those are set in, quite literally set in stone. I guess I wonder if that's where that a phrase originated.
Maybe.
So yeah, I think that we as conservatives need to remember what we're conserving and identify really strongly with that label of like, we are going to defend the unborn because of the principle of knowing that every human being was made in the image of God.
Yeah, and I think knowing our history, and both biblically and in the Constitution, our country and through God, is very important. And kind of this, just our ancestry, like we were talking about, the people, our heroes, were not loud and performative. They knew the principles and the values that they stood for and that weren't changing. They had a foundation. And kids nowadays aren't being taught to look at our country, our history, or our faith. They aren't going by any 3 of those value systems, the timeless value systems. And they're being taught in schools to just go with the flow and not have anything. Kind of goes with our commitment too. Don't commit to anything, So yeah, that's a huge lie that's starting in preschool.
Yeah.
That they're just being taught to not really believe anything, have an open mind, like you're saying. But there are some things that you have to stand firm on.
Yeah. It is so pervasive how many young people believe that there's no timeless truths. Like, I would love to eventually, we go on campus or something and interview students about that because I'm very curious of what the response is. But I think it is overwhelmingly, there's no timeless values. You just have to be open-minded.
Yeah.
And with that, we just want to encourage you all to stick to these principles, stick to what you know is true and good and beautiful and things that won't change over time. And yeah, we hope you stand against these lies.
Yeah, reject all of them.
Yes, total rejection.
Be different than the culture.
Exactly. All right, we're going to wrap up there. But thank you all so much for tuning in. We hope you enjoyed the episode today, and we look forward to seeing you next time.